No, not the Humpty. No.
Dance,
what was
here's
his
your
name?
chance to do Hump D. Well, or what was his name?
But I don't remember like his actual
Really?
name. Like, yeah.
Richard Johnson.
No, it was.
Alfonso Poo Poo Fatty the Third.
Wouldn't it all hear their real names sometimes? Yes.
No, it was Shock G.
That's right.
Shock G. Humpty. Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
the greatest 90s rapper?
He 2021 was when he passed.
Tupac.
Greatest 90s rapper?
Tupac.
I'm gonna go Dre.
What do you think, Rob?
Tupac.
Oh, you guys both said Pac. I'm going Dre. Hey, we're all West Side. What about you?
90s best rapper?
Yeah.
This motherfucker's from Boston.
I was
Dude.
gonna say you're probably
He's from,
gonna
or
say
not
Oh.
Boston. You from
Boston. Boston
Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Okay.
Best
So-
East Coast rapper? Or best during that bit, Biggie? I'm gonna go with Biggie.
No, best from the 90s?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Big
So,
Small.
okay, so
he's the East Coast guy.
West Side.
Side.
Sorry, we're the rest of us are West Side.
Yeah, I mean, Pac is ridiculous. Good. Dre, ridiculous too. Not
They're
taking
all
nothing away
okay.
from him, you know,
Yeah.
Biggie's my favorite because of the East Coast, and I like his flow. It's like smooth and savage.
Yeah,
I'll give you that.
Him rapping.
that was just the East Coast sound though. You know, at the time, just that kind of like, jazzy
Yeah.
kind of sound, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So who is your favorite gangster rapper from the 1960s?
Curtis Blow. I'm your pusher. Damn
Funk
right.
Master Flex, but he's from like the 80s.
Yeah.
Play me a song.
Yeah, who the hell was
Curtis
rapping in the
Blow.
60s, right?
I don't think anybody did.
Yeah.
Nobody to know. No, I'm just fucking around. Welcome to Culture Copia, the podcast where we discuss all things pop culture, from the movies and games we loved as a kid to new releases and everything in between, and just about anything else that pops in our heads. Rob, Greg, you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
It wasn't too far off because rap started like late 70s into
Right.
the 80s.
Yeah. Sugar Hill Gang.
Sugar Hill Gang.
Grandmaster
Yeah.
Flash.
That was like 80s Grandmaster Flash, 70s, 80s.
Yeah. Late 70s.
You know how that all started, right? They were like at like a barbecue, like a cookout. All the guys from Sugar Hill Gang.
Hmm.
And they were listening to some funk and they just started like rapping over it.
Right.
And that's how they were like, that sounds good, man. We should like record that.
Right.
You know? Cause what's often like times considered like the first like official like rap song, Rapper's Delight. That bass line is from Good Times by Chic.
Okay.
Doom, doom, doom. Ba-doom, ba-doom, doom, 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 doom,
Interesting.
doom.
Yeah. So they
Good
sampled that.
times. These are the. I don't know how much I can sing that without a cease and desist. But yeah. So it was all they were all just like kind of like rapping and messing around over some funk music.
Right.
Yeah. So, as Matt said today, we're going to be covering the 1960s.
Yeah.
Kind of looking forward to this because, really, almost weird. Really all started, man. Music was, we could keep tracing the music in the movies and some of the technology. Not so much video games at this point in the 60s, right?
Real early.
No, but we got some tech.
Just the glimmer of it.
Yeah, just a
There's still a
smidge.
ton of tech.
Yeah, a
like,
lot of
from the
tech
60s.
that you could go on.
We're gonna do one of these this time.
Okay, so we're gonna be rolling to see who goes first. What do we do? Highest number goes first, or highest number goes last?
At this point,
Why don't
I
we
don't
do-
even fucking remember.
Who wants? Is it a
we-
privilege to go first or last? I always thought it would be a privilege to go last.
Going last is they remember you more when you go last.
Yeah, okay,
People remember
okay,
what they hear
so-
last,
So we go low to
Highest-
high, first to last.
Highest number goes last.
Okay.
Well, I got
That's
a
a
3.
That's a tree.
That's a trace.
So you're probably going second.
Rob pulling out the stats. Look at him.
2.
Yeah, that was
2.
I got a 3.
All right.
Okay, Matt and Nate's.
Tiebreaker. Rock, paper, scissors. 1,
Okay.
2, 3, shoot.
Yep.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, shoot. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Ooh.
All right. Okay, so Greg, me, Nate.
Yep.
Cool.
Greg.
I'm up.
There wasn't any like good or like notable music in the 1960s, was there?
There really wasn't. Music just kind of skipped over the 60s, you know?
It sucked. No revolutionary bands.
Right.
No no rock bands coming over from
a
another
certain
country.
a certain genre really didn't get started.
Nothing was
in the
born.
60s. Right.
Oh wait. Oh.
Yeah, 60s. That was a huge time. Think about what you had going on. JFK assassination. You had Korean Vietnam War going on. Civil rights was in full swing.
Yeah,
right.
Cold War.
So there's a lot going on, and music started to kind of reflect that. People started seeing music as a way to kind of express your opinion, you know, and voice your opinion, really. So the music really started reflecting that. And, you know, before, like, the 60s, you know, it was pretty much like jazz, big band.
Yeah.
You know.
You had a little bit of...
A lot more...
A little bit of Elvis Presley in there.
Right. We had Elvis kind of...
Late.
I guess he would kind of kick off rock.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So in the 60s, we pushed the guitars and pretty much the drums to the front of the band.
Yeah.
Like now the music's more about the guitar, this electric guitar, you know. And so that kind of opened up rock and roll. And then through the 60s, these bands are starting to experiment with that electric guitar. What can we do with this instrument here? And you know, that became, again, like the guitar was the face of rock and roll, pretty much. So you started having this. We had the British invasion.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So a little crossover here for me and you. February 1964, the Beatles.
On the Ed Sullivan
Ed
show?
Sullivan Show. Yeah. Little music, little TV action, but that's a lot of people see these guys for the first time and they're like, they need a fucking haircut.
right.
Here's the British boys, man.
Yeah. That was...
And see, too, like the British bands, they were influenced by American rock bands.
Yeah.
Artists.
Well, and a lot of...
start hearing the sounds that us over here in America are putting out.
Yeah.
And that's actually called a beat band. And that's where the Beatles come from.
Okay.
You know, they were originally... Their original name was the Silver Beatles.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, when they were playing, like, the clubs and stuff over in Liverpool.
Yeah. So, yeah, you had this British invasion, Beatlemania going on. Kind of taking over the scene. But, yeah, then again with, like, the civil rights and, you know, like, the Vietnam War, people are starting to... So the counterculture...
Yeah.
kind of breaks open too.
It's kind of history repeating itself right now because there's a lot of parallels that we could go back, you know, 60 years ago, right? To the 60s that we're kind of reliving again now, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Instead of the Cold War, it's, well, we're actually kind of back in a Cold War if you think about it. You know?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. And that's what gives me hope. You know, when I think about the future, the only thing that gives me hope is like, well, it's bad. Things are kind of bad right now, and the way things are going. But our parents' generation got through it. They got through the 80s. You know. So I have hope that we'll get through it. But I digress.
So, and then kind of had like the psychedelic rock.
Yeah.
Kind of come out.
Yeah.
Your Grateful Dead.
I was going to say the Grateful Dead.
Pink Floyd.
Well,
and you know that's kind of a testament too to the Beatles kind of opening the door for the progressive rock genre. You know, Genesis, Pink Floyd. You know, those kind of bands moving forward. Rush in the 70s.
Right.
Some of my favorite. I mean, I love prog rock and progressive pop too. On the other end, with like Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
You know, one of my all-time favorite albums.
Yeah, you had like the surfer craze going on.
Yeah. Well, when they busted out of that, Pet Sounds was like, and we just talked about like my list of top albums, and that's like one of my absolute favorites.
Right.
And that kind of opened the door for, you know, progressive music as well. But yeah, the surfer craze even before that, which was kind of lame. But
Yeah.
that's just my opinion, but you know.
And they said like rock and roll was a combination of gospel, jazz, and blues, and country.
Country.
Yeah.
And so they just started mixing all this stuff together, and now we got rock and roll.
I can hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you-
Because you really think about it, 50s. Okay, we had Elvis, but
Yeah.
I mean,
He did a lot of gospel stuff too. He's got some gospel albums out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, look at Ray Charles. If we're talking about
Yeah.
gospel.
Well, look at him. He can't look at you.
yeah.
You're an asshole. You know that?
I just mean because he's dead. What do you think I was saying?
Oh,
Something dark?
no pun intended on that one. I'm sure too, right?
Oh, now who's being an asshole?
I don't mean Ray. I don't mean his race either.
Oh, because he's
Because he's blind. You know, yeah.
blind.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he, that's what he's. Jesus
Should we rescue them or let him keep going? I don't know.
Yeah, I just let him go. So,
I hate
let's-
it here.
you know, we had the start of the Rolling Stones
Fuck
in the
yeah.
60s.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, hey, huge,
Still rolling.
still rolling, right?
Yeah, they just released an album.
Amazing.
Right.
Mick Jagger's unstoppable.
right.
They have like their new single, not to derail you, but
No.
was like number 3.
Right.
I
Last
saw
week?
I saw a meme the other day, and it was did you post it? Maybe you, I don't know if you posted or not. No, a friend of mine posted, and it was the
Well, I'm
first
also a
ever
friend.
picture is Keith Richards, and
Oh,
it was
yeah.
a medieval like painting.
right.
Well, Bill Maher, I think, had a joke about, I think it was him, that, like, Keith Richards looked 70.
70 years ago.
He looked 70 when he was in his 20s, and now that he's 70, he looks 69.
I read one meme. It was like, we need to preserve the planet to leave a nice world for Keith Richards.
Right. Right.
Did you know, also, while we're on that subject, that Johnny Depp based
Yes,
the
Jack Sparrow.
mannerisms of Jack Sparrow off of Keith Richards?
Yes, I knew
Oh,
that.
no shit.
And that's
Okay.
why Keith Richards plays his dad in the third installment of
Huh.
Pirates of the Caribbean. And in, I believe it was the fourth or maybe the fifth, I think it was the fourth, Paul McCartney plays his uncle. So
Okay.
Wow.
Huh.
Small
Won't be
world in
seeing any
Hollywood.
more of the Pirates of the Caribbean, unfortunately, from Johnny Depp.
maybe
Well,
not.
Disney's not pleased with him right now. Is that
Well, he's not pleased with Disney,
Yeah,
you know,
TBD.
because they dropped him because of the whole Amber Heard thing, and then now he was acquitted and everything.
Amber
like
Turd.
that.
Right.
I heard he
and-
wanted something like 500 llamas to come back.
Llamas to come back.
That's
He-
right. There
that
was
was
a deal
his,
for
like-
millions of dollars plus 500 llamas.
Like they give him 500 llamas.
It's part of
Really?
the rider. Yeah. I don't know why Disney didn't just rustle up 500 llamas. This seems easy.
Well,
You're
he
Disney.
is he because he's pissed at him, and he was like, "Oh,
Yeah, something
he's like
ridiculous.
he's something ridiculous, something so ridiculous that you'll never say yes to it."
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Just a little, middle.
Could you imagine if they were like, "Okay, then who's the guy that goes around and hustles up 500
It's Disney.
llamas?"
They can do it.
They could do it.
Bobby Gurr ain't worried about 500 llamas, man.
Yeah, yeah.
He just claps his hand. He goes, and they show up
Oh,
But
shit.
that's
with that kind of money. No problem.
I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're talking about 1960s music.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
There's probably llamas in the 60s.
Yeah, there was.
They existed then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
shit.
so we had the Rolling Stones, the Who. Yeah,
Who?
the Who.
What?
Who are
Who?
you?
The Who?
And the Guess Who.
The Who?
Who's on first?
No, I'm not gonna guess.
Yardbirds.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
Yardbirds. The Yardbirds. They were like a super group, like pre.
Well, if you
They're
thought
like-
the monkeys too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so the Yardbirds were like, so like when you think of like a super group and it's like all these like famous musicians coming together, like the Yardbirds were like a super group before these guys got famous,
Right.
Because they all branched out. It was like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, like a bunch of guys that were in the Yardbirds that like went
Right.
on to have like these wildly successive, successful careers.
Yeah.
I don't know what successive is. That's not a word. I don't know where I got that from.
Success after success. You know, I know what you mean, but don't know where it came from.
It's excessive success, and I pushed it together.
Successive.
Officially coined.
Successive, yeah. Well, hey, officially coined. You heard and saw it here first.
Then we had Motown.
Ooh, yeah.
You had your, Aretha Franklin.
Out of Detroit.
Your Marvin Gaye's, yes.
Yeah.
Started out as just like he said, Detroit-based record label.
Yeah.
But just kind of blew up into its own genre.
Yeah.
Pretty much. That's where you get some, Aretha Franklin? Oh, come on. Yeah.
Still to this day, and I say this unironically, the sexiest voice I think I've ever heard. I think I've ever heard. Aretha Franklin, man. When she sings Think, whoo, you better think. Think about what you're trying. Like I said, I think I can only do so much before we get a letter.
Then, we had the Beach Boys, that whole surfer rock. We had the Doors.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
With that whole psychedelic
again,
rock.
coming into that acid rock, the psychedelic.
And so then we had the Summer of Love.
Yeah.
Everybody going out to San Francisco. Getting their
yeah.
groove on, their hippiness on. So that in turn, I mean, we definitely can't talk about the 60s without talking
Woodstock.
Yeah,
the OG Woodstock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something like 500,000 people showed up to that. And they were only expecting 100.
Yeah.
100,000 people.
What was
just getting that going was because they had trouble finding the right spot for it.
Yeah.
You know? And again, they were only expecting 100,000 people to show up for this thing.
Still 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah. Can you imagine just that?
Yeah.
And then 4 times over that end up showing up.
What was Woodstock like? It rained all morning. In the afternoon, it cleared up.
And so that was 60, 69.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the folk music scene was hopping at that time.
You had the greats like Jimi Hendrix and
I'm talking about folk music.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Bob Dylan. New York was a big hub for that at that time.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Did Bob Dylan do Woodstock?
I don't think he was
did.
there. Yeah. But Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, I think, were there.
Yeah.
Your mom would know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, your mom would definitely know. I remember talking to her a lot about those old.
Oh, she loves Crosby, Stills.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember singing and dancing with her down camping. That was a good time. That was a good time.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Creedence was the first band to sign on Woodstock.
Really?
And that kind of got
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that kind of got everybody
CCR?
else kind of jumping on board.
Hell yeah.
Because at first, it's one of the bands that passed, their manager just come to him hey, there's a concert that this pig farmer's having. They went
that's how they described it.
That's how it was. That's how it was described to him. I forget the band, but yeah, that's how the manager described Woodstock to him. There's this pig farmer wants you to come play out in his field.
Attention.
And it's
bear fucker.
We're good. Yeah. Beatles, they were busy recording Abbey Road.
Yeah.
So that's what, and they tried to get John Lennon to come, but John Lennon wasn't allowed in the country.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was during. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
During all the his protests and things like that, when the government was kind of watching.
Yeah, he just got busted.
Yeah. Oh, with the yeah.
Right.
Have you ever? There's a documentary called "The U.S. versus John Lennon."
Okay.
And it's bring that a little closer to you. I just want to make sure I can hear you.
Nice.
But it's about all of that, him getting busted for the government, Richard Nixon and that whole administration kind of coming down
right.
on John Lennon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Huh.
It's really good. I forget who directed it, but really good documentary. If you get a chance to check it out. I mean, it's like at this point 10, 15 years old, maybe older. You know, so it's not like it's not brand new or anything, but still holds up. You know, as a film and a documentary. Yeah, I would check it out. The U.S. versus John Lennon.
U.S. Okay, yeah. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. He wasn't allowed in the country for Woodstock.
I thought that was funny. Jethro Tull declined.
Really?
He didn't like hippies.
Oh.
That was his. He doesn't like hippies, and like he
or
thought
pig farmers.
He thought there would be too much indecent nudity and drinking and drug use, and he didn't want.
It sounded like he was right.
I think he was right.
I think so.
I think he was onto something.
I mean, if he's against that kind of stuff, I mean, okay, yeah.
Rolling Stones got invited, but Mick was busy shooting a
fucking.
I think he was shooting a movie. Was he? I don't.
Maybe.
Or maybe. But and then Keith Richards' girlfriend just had a baby, so Rolling Stones pass. Yeah, just all these bands that like pass.
Did we establish that Keith Richards is a vampire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Led Zeppelin, his manager, their manager, declined, passed on it because they didn't want to just be another band on the bill. Like this huge.
They wanted to headline.
They're not headlining, but that wasn't their decision.
It was the managers. In a lot of these cases, that's the manager hears about Woodstock and was like, nah.
Well, you got to think about the music scene at the time, and a lot of these guys, and you know, they were so busy partying, drinking, doing drugs. Like their managers weren't just managers; they were like their babysitters. Yeah, right. They had to make all of these big decisions for them because these guys were just. They were either busy partying or making music, or they were just out of it. You know what I mean? So it's like, man, fuck. All right, I guess I'm in charge of everything now.
Right.
One of the more underrated. I know you're talking about Woodstock, but just in general, as far as music goes, Tommy James and the Shondells.
Yes, they declined to be at
really
at Woodstock. Yeah,
really. I didn't even know they were like. I've heard of.
They said they regretted it later.
Yeah. I
love Tommy and the Shondells.
Oh, dude! Like I said, one of the most underrated groups of that era, and maybe like in all of like music history. Like they just, when you look back at some of the stuff that they've done and like that progressive pop genre, like, dude.
Yeah, that was pretty much the beginning of pop.
It was, and that's what I'm talking about. You know, with bands
60s.
like that, and you know, and people like Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys doing, you know, what they were doing over
and
there.
Like Rob mentioned with the Monkees.
Yeah.
You know, being on TV, just like.
Oh yeah.
Brought a whole nother level.
Well, music. You know, they were, you know, I mean, like Elvis, like, you know, women swooned over him, but you didn't have like, it wasn't so much like girls. Like these guys looked young. You know what I mean?
Right,
and they were pretty. You know, like Elvis was like a handsome, rugged man, but like these guys were like pretty boys.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that, and that kind of started that whole, like you said, the whole pop music scene. Like
the bubblegum rock.
Yeah.
It's kind of what's like, you know.
Yeah.
It's just the poppy.
I don't know why, but
make you feel good.
When you say that, all I can think of is, remember that SNL skit with like Horatio Sands and like Jimmy Fallon and like the Christmas, like, I wish Christmas Day was, and like Horatio Sands is like playing the guitar. I don't know why when you say bubblegum rock, I just picture Horatio Sands. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, 66. I mean, there's still some really good, like, is it Mamas and the Papas?
Oh, yeah.
All the leaves are brown and the sky is gray.
That's enough. We're going to get a cease and desist. Well, okay. And
some of those songs, or the Carpenters.
Yeah.
Weren't they from the 60s?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, and some of that stuff, too. Like, you know, with like the modern, you know, era and the modern technology and stuff, like it'll all come back around, like Mama Cass. You're talking about the Mamas and the Papas. The You've got to make your own kind of... That's
SNL
been...
just did a skit on that last night.
Because okay, so that's been popular for the last couple of months. That's been like a really big like popular sound.
It's coming back
on
around
TikTok,
and it was that song was set to like they were like doing like imagine that song to like a zombie apocalypse movie.
Little ironic scoring.
Yeah, but
I always think of when I hear that song. Remember Lost? And when they first show like the guy that was living down in the hatch. And he's listening to that, so because all the music was from like the 60s and 70s, because that's when that was like built.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's the song he's listening to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much all I got.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It was a profound time,
Right.
and honestly, you kind of you had the 60s. They kind of rolled into the 70s, and that's when music started kind of changing. That's when you really started having like branching off. Right. From like
we pretty
punk
much
rock.
we pretty much had rock and roll split into all its different genres in
and
the
then,
70s.
And then the 80s come around.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that splits even further into, like rap and hip hop, and then fuck the 90s.
Well, I mean, if you look at some of the some of the late 60s, you had bands coming up, especially in the rock genre, like Black Sabbath,
right,
and Judas Priest, who at the time they were doing more of that psychedelic rock, that prog rock style,
right.
But then that eventually developed into what we know as metal.
Right.
Yeah.
So very, very pivotal.
But for me, 60s was pretty much just taking the guitar and let's see what we can do with this thing.
Yeah.
Let's start making some wild noises with
experimentation.
Right.
It's kind of like the 80s with the synthesizers and stuff, right? Like the Doors and
Yeah. Well, that's what it was all about, and that's why I talk about like that progressive rock, progressive pop, and I keep mentioning this name over and over again, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, because he was a fucking pioneer of that.
Yeah.
When it comes to let's experiment with these sounds. I mean, that album, Pet Sounds, I mean, he had live animals in the studio.
Right.
He had a fucking horse in the studio and dogs barking and shit. Like, just, I want to bring in all these different sounds and, like, see, you know what I mean?
Well, too,
like,
you had the Beatles going over to India.
Yeah.
Later.
George Harrison was really into that.
And kind of bringing in worldly cultures into American music and that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, exactly.
That opened
like
a lot of Americans up to
different cultures and different things.
Right.
Norwegian wood, Within You, Without You, a lot of that sitar, that Indian, like these sounds we hadn't heard before.
Right.
Coming
now they're in popular music.
Yeah.
Right.
No, very, very pivotal moments.
Nate? Yeah, but we haven't got to you for a minute. What are your thoughts on the 60s and the movies and music? And
I mean, as far as 60s musics go, Jimi Hendrix was
Hendrix
amazing.
is a big one.
Yeah.
Guitar in the 60s really stands out for me. And you mentioned the guitar becoming like the new front man, so to speak, for the bands. And I thought that was interesting how it split, and Hendrix, Clapton, some of these like master guitar players emerged from that period.
Right.
So, I like to watch them on YouTube and see how they did it. And some of the old Woodstock footage is amazing to go back into. And a lot of my music for the 60s that comes to mind is stuff my parents had in the CD case. The first taste I got, they had The Doors. And they had Pink Floyd, there's Dark Side of the Moon playing. And we had one of these cool like disc shuffles. And so we had like 4 or 5 different CDs in there. And a few of those are from, 60s. And
right.
Oh, yeah.
So that was kind of early sounds for me. And I enjoyed that quite a bit. But the guitar music's really what stuck with me. It was always like, man, I wish I could rock like that.
Right.
When I thought about that, it came to that era. It's like that's where it was. I mean, it sounded like some kind of extreme purist, because I feel like the technology, because the show's about the technology here. The technology for the guitar was like evolving rapidly at that point. They figured out how to amplify it. They figured out how to run it through pedals. They figured out how to change the sound to get something metallic, something that resonates differently.
Yeah.
So it was a really exciting time for music. And then the Beatles really swept in with like this multicultural kaleidoscope of music that people just never saw and couldn't get enough of. Had
Right.
to see the Beatles live. I've seen footage of them filling streets like they're,
Right.
it's like Michael Jackson levels of popularity
Right.
before
Oh,
MJ.
dude.
That was phenomenal.
I've
in the
read
country.
several articles about like when the Beatles would play in concert and like they like girls would like piss themselves.
Yeah.
They were so excited to see them. Like
they're pissing themselves, passing out.
yeah, they were talking about like it would like dude, the floors were like wet with piss.
Yeah.
Like after these Beatles concerts and who knows what other kind of secretions.
The excitement was certainly there.
Yeah, it
People
was.
were just
Yeah.
electric for the Beatles, and they never saw anything like it. And at this time, too, they could do records well. Like now,
Yeah.
we're getting into
Right.
distributed music.
Yeah.
Right.
And
yeah.
so now we
records
can-
was a big thing.
Yeah.
We can all
Long
hear
play
that.
records.
And radio's getting
LPs.
good, and now radio syndication's getting big. So our music was like starting to spread faster too
Right.
as we ramp up through the '60s into the '70s. So yeah, I mean a lot went down there.
Yeah.
Interesting era.
Very much.
Would have liked to see it first person. But,
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Hendrix, did you know that he actually learned to play the guitar? So he's left-handed, which everybody I think knows, but he learned to play on a right-handed guitar. So, like, basically everything was upside down for him.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I heard Hendrix practiced all the time. They
Oh,
talk
like,
about
even
Hendrix
as a
in his
kid.
apartment. He'd be in the kitchen cooking. He had the
Yeah.
guitar hanging.
Yeah.
He'd play a little guitar, and then he'd do his thing. And he'd just mix it throughout the day, and he just
Oh,
kept
yeah.
getting so good because, well, he kept practicing, and he was ridiculously talented, too.
Right.
Yeah, so I thought that was cool by Hendrix. Like, he was talented for sure, but he also, like, hustled to get good. Which
He did.
I like those stories.
You can't talk about modern music without giving credit to one of the greatest guitar players of all time.
Right.
Yeah.
And on
Those
that note, I think we're
shenanigans.
going to move on to our next subject, which is Matt with movies
Yeah.
and cinema and television.
Yeah,
A little-
all of
a
it.
little
Yeah.
bit-
Oh, yeah. No, and that's that's kind of like I said. We had a little crossover there with the Beatles and the Ed Sullivan Show. Those variety shows were becoming really big at that time. And that's how all of a sudden we had this new way of introducing different types of media to the American people. Not so much, we're not getting as much culture from overseas except for like when now you get into we got British invasion and the Beatles, and you got these who are these guys, and that kind of opens this whole wave of like now we're communicating in intercontinentally basically,
Right.
and it's one of those things you're just I mean there's so many different shows and things at that time. Color TV becomes big at that time. I think the first color broadcast was actually in like the mid 50s. But by
It's
19
real expensive.
Dude, it was. And that's the thing. You've got a lot of you still have a lot of black and white. But the 60s kind of opened up the door to some new genres, in television and, movies. A lot of Westerns at that time. Bonanza, Gunsmoke, these things are on TV. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, like the whole, the Man Without a Name trilogy. Things like that. And those spaghetti Westerns is what they call them. A lot of these Italian directors, that's what I don't know if that's a derogatory term now to call them spaghetti Westerns. But that's what they were known as, because there were these Italian filmmakers making these Western films at that time. And I grew up on a lot of that stuff, man. Those old Clint Eastwood and, Lee Van Cleef and those guys. And, it was crazy. It was a crazy time. Sitcoms were becoming a little more, I don't want to say risque, but, they were broadening the way that we kind of look at these characters, Gilligan's Island, Bewitched, things like that, where, you've got You got women that aren't hiding their bodies anymore. Yeah, you know, and it's and we're becoming a little more, I don't want to say desensitized, but maybe you know, we're accepting, you know, people a little better at this time, and understanding, okay, you know, maybe we can let some things slide, and we don't have to be so buttoned up and conservative about the way that we view our media.
We can be real.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It kind of ties back in the hippie movement. The hippie movement was this like backlash against the system, backlash against the war, backlash against basically like non-human-esque behavior, like these weird systems that are appearing all around us. These hippies didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to fight anybody.
Yeah.
Peace and love. That's what they wanted. And so, yeah, that concept runs right through the 60s for me. This idea that, and I'm not sure where we landed on that outside of the 60s. To some extent, it seems like maybe the hippies lost that battle, but it was worth fighting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you know, that continues on. That influence and that way of looking at culture.
Well, and I'm fast forwarding a bit, but you know, John Lennon, who was a big part of all of that movement throughout the 60s, you know, and into the 70s, you know, you look at his song, you know, Give Peace a Chance. And when you look at the lyrics of that, you know, all we are saying is give peace a chance. And like, dude, like how, like you can't even like, how do you put it better than that?
Right.
You're not forcing anything down anyone's throat. You're just saying like, hey, maybe just try it.
Right.
You know?
What's it going to hurt?
Like, well, why don't we just try to love each other, you know? But, you know, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of things too. You know, James Bond films are you know, the original, like the Sean Connery.
Making his debuts, he was all over the screen, man.
You know, so when we talk about that kind of the, you know, the love and the free expression and that comes with that movement that you talk about, you know, The Graduate, that's another big one. With Dustin Hoffman, you know, another movie that, you know, we're showing like a little more sexuality on the screen, you know, and people are getting used to seeing this as part of, you know, as part of media, as part of of pop culture, and understanding that, like, you know, we're humans, we have these desires, and you know, we're you know, we have the freedom of speech, we have free expression, you know, and we can show and we can kind of say what we want, you know, to a certain extent. Right. You know, and people are actually starting to come around to this idea of you know, like what does freedom really mean for us, you know, as human beings. I know that sounds like really deep I'm just talking about movies, but you know, it really does kind of open, you know, a lot of doors. Stanley Kubrick was doing a lot at this time too. You know, 2001: A Space Odyssey, I believe, was what, 1968.
Huge movie.
You know what I mean?
Film.
And we're coming into these ideas again of, you know, like science fiction, but it's opening a lot of doors of asking questions of what is out there, or, you know, what if something like this happens, you know? You know, I want to actually, earlier than that, and one of my all-time favorite movies, and it's my favorite Stanley Kubrick movie, is, and I believe it was I had to look it up. I'm cheating. 1964. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Movie.
Amazing movie. That's my favorite Kubrick movie.
So good.
You know, I mean, The Shining's a close second, but that'll come later, you know.
It's got the Shining.
Yeah, but The Shining. We just talked about The Simpsons on the last episode. That's a good one. Yeah, no TV and no beer make Homer something.
Go crazy.
Don't mind if I
do. You know, but we're opening the doors to a lot of different genres, like I said, at this time. You know, horror. I
was gonna say horror.
We're getting into that. Alfred Hitchcock, Psycho. You know,
right.
Kind of redefine that. That was 1960, so we're talking about early on. But you know, it's, Rosemary's Baby later on in the same decade.
I'll say Hitchcock is one of my favorite. I'll call him horror or suspense directors of all time.
Yeah.
He is so good at just the whole process.
Right.
Yeah.
Up and down the stack.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, we're opening new doors. This whole decade. That's what this was about. We talked about the music. I'm talking about the movies and the television, all of this media across all of this. Like, we're, like I said, we're not even just opening new doors. We're defining what all of this means to us. Right. We're taking in new types of art, new types of media. We're creating new genres, entire new genres, not just like, oh, that's like a tweak on, and it might be, like you said, we talked about rock and roll, being like a amalgamation of all these different styles, but it's not even just a new take on something old, it's a completely new thing, right. And to think of it that way, I mean, we have a little bit of that in just about every decade since, and probably before. But this might have been the biggest decade that's just jam-packed with opening all these new doors and creating all these new genres and all these new sounds.
Yeah,
and all
breaking down barriers.
Yeah, all these new visual aspects that we're seeing, and even taking it a step further, like we're technologically, we're advancing, like,
oh yeah, it's going down technology wise
at an insane rate, and of course, comparing it to today, now, like, we could say we're actually advancing at an insane rate, but at that time, when you compare it to everything leading up to that point, this whole decade is just like, something happened, something clicked in everyone's brains that was like, we just opened up creatively and started to really look at the world in a new way.
Right. I wonder if that's got something to do with the space program, because that was like a achievement for all of humanity, and it was an advancement in technology, and then it really kind of, no pun intended, kind of showed us that the sky's the limit. With enough brain power and ingenuity, we can do whatever the fuck we want.
I mean, if we're if we're talking about this media, screen and television, and you want to talk about one of the biggest, like, the most watched moments in television history, the moon landing in 1969, famously also directed by Stanley Kubrick on.
I was wondering if you're gonna tie it in. Well done.
Yeah.
Was it really?
No. The theory is, like, the whole fake moon landing.
And he was the director on the fake.
He was the director of the fake moon landing.
Yes.
Neil deGrasse Tyson's got a whole thing about that.
Yeah.
And he says, you can go into the Space Center, Cape Canaveral, right, and you can see all these documents, all these buildings. He's like, there's millions and millions of documents, and millions and all this. All these records.
Yeah.
He's like, you'd have to fake all of that. And at the end of it, it's easier to go to the moon than it is to fake all because it's not all the personnel. It's building the buildings. Yeah. It's faking the footage. It's like the whole thing.
Yeah.
That is more complicated than it is to go to the moon.
And he grew up during all that.
Right.
Yeah. He was born in 58.
Something like that.
Okay, yeah.
So, like, he grew up throughout the 60s, and he, that would have put him at age 11 watching the moon landing. Can you imagine?
No.
That'd be so awesome.
I was 11 watching the Twin Towers fall.
Oh, wow.
And when you talk about
watching...
Yeah.
You talk about an impactful moment, on TV, and, I can't imagine, like... that was an interesting moment. I didn't really fully understand it,
right? But
just knowing the pain and sorrow in that, and the power behind that, I can't imagine flipping that on the other side and seeing the moon landing at that age, and maybe not fully understanding, but feeling like the power,
right,
behind that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what that meant to all of us, not even just, sure, in our country because of the, the great space race, like who's going to get to the moon first, and it was the U.S. All right, great, good for us, but just what that meant for humanity,
right,
and technology moving forward,
Yeah. Well, and another thing too is it's like, okay, they're talking about that, and then they would have to fake all of the other moon landings that you don't hear about, right? We kept going to the moon, after the very first moon landing.
Oh yeah.
So they'd have to fake all that too, just to keep to keep the story going.
Right. Well, yeah, because so it was the Apollo 11?
Yeah.
Apollo 11 is when we
was
landed.
the famous, voyage where we actually landed on the moon.
When we stepped foot.
Yeah, but there were missions after that, like you said, to return, and like Apollo 13 famously is the one that had all the issues.
Which I love the way that it ends, because it's like it was one of their shining moments. Mm-hmm. Not only because they went to the moon, and nobody, even in the movie, they're like, nah, nobody's watching this. We've already been to the moon. Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
But then they say at the end that it was like their one of their finest achievements. It was like a spectacular failure in the sense that they didn't go to the moon, but they proved that if something happened, they could bring those people back. Right.
It's not a total disaster.
Right. It was like a shining achievement that, yes, they failed to go to the moon, but what they succeeded in was showing that the people here on Earth still had those astronauts back, and they were doing everything they could to get them back, and they survived and came back. Yeah. And that in itself is an achievement.
Yeah.
I think the whole decade is a testament to, humans just, like I said, kind of broadening our perspective.
Yeah.
We talk about all these different aspects in the pop culture and in media, and the movies. Like I said, you're opening up whole new genres. The horror genre is a big thing. Hitchcock's doing his thing.
Yeah.
Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
We're looking at the world in a whole new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of sci-fi movies are coming out at that time. Again, the technological advances that put us where we were at that time. The music, the different sounds we're experimenting with. We're opening our minds, we're broadening our perspective, and we're learning.
LSD and psilocybin had a lot to do with the opening of the mind and the perspective, right?
It might have, and let's credit it. Credit where credit's due. Honestly, I mean, if that got us to where we are today, like, kudos.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Nate,
Robert, what do we got?
What do we got on tech? And
we were doing a good job of tech. We introduced it here. We talked about space.
Yeah, that's
and space is one of the biggest things to happen.
This is probably my favorite aspect of the 60s.
Yeah.
The space race.
We could sprinkle a little background on there. Coming out of the 50s into the 60s, we started to get chip technology. We started to be able to run microprocessors. We started to be able to get computers computing.
And what's crazy about that is back then the calculator that we hold in our hands today, just a regular calculator.
Yeah.
Has more processing power than the computer on the
Apollo,
spaceship. Is that correct?
I mean, I hear this all the time. Yeah, absolutely. And when we go to the St. Louis Science Center, for example, you can see a capsule in there. Right. Looking at that thing and thinking that thing went into space bends my mind. I'm like, how could this Radio Shack thing get into space?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, amazing things were done with what they had at that point. You had Kennedy, too, in the early 60s coming out. And Kennedy was vehement with the administration that we were going to space.
Right.
Yeah. That was a big platform.
I'm going to give you Nate's perspective because he can go read Wikipedia. But at that time, man, Kennedy was getting leaned on not to go to space.
Yeah.
Right.
His administration were saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Mm-hmm. Don't do that technology. And there's a power structure under the government, and they were telling him don't do it. But Kennedy was going to do it anyway. And so we did end up in space, but it was a high cost to get out there. But so that was a huge leader we had during that time period, as JFK was in that time frame, and he pushed to get people into space, and because he believed in the country. And before him, there was a warning about the military-industrial complex kind of taking things a bit, and so I mean, he flew in the face of that a bit. And so that was big for a president to do something like that. And then you get Nixon later, and he's playing ball. But so from a space perspective, we got pretty far. We got into space. Right. We got Apollo 11 up there. We got the chip technology to start doing computing businesses, and NASA is probably 10 years ahead of that, getting space tech up there. Speculation. And then even before that, which is interesting, is previous to that, you had the Roswell incidents that came on the tail of the 60s. So pushing into that, I think maybe my own theory, some of that technology may have been worked into a little bit, because I believe we did retrieve craft, we did find tech, and then all of a sudden, boom, we got computers, we got all sorts of gadgets.
Right.
So maybe there's some influence there. Maybe we saw some jumps in technology during that time period to get us into space, to get us computers, to get us certain technologies. So the 60s saw like a big jump, in technology. Fascinating how these things happen. So the 60s was inspired in a lot of ways. And as far as like a Renaissance period goes, as far as technology went, as soon as you've got stuff like compute that can, and the first networks started coming online, computers are starting to talk to each other. And so that ended up, of course, changing the world over time. But that all started in the 60s, the seeds of all these things at MIT and other universities at that time were doing a lot of cool things. Right. The video game side of it's kind of sparse. I got to say there wasn't a ton to research. I did a little history, a little digging. 60s not like my solid state of knowing what's going on personally. Apparently there's some video games being developed at MIT at that time. There was a professor getting the very beginning of a game going.
So at the beginning of Pong?
It sounded like beginning of Pong, something simple. I can't recall the name of the game off the top of my head, but so the seeds of video games are percolating in the 60s as well. You know how those go. That was exciting. And then I guess 2 programming languages came out at that time too. Computers got, Fortran, and I think Cobalt came out at that time. And those are some of the very like foundational languages for compute. And so that represents a lot, because until then you'd have to articulate things to the machine at a very machine 100010, very, it wasn't Englishy. And these languages made like an English way to start to talk to a computer. Still rough, but huge as far as interfacing with technology went.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So we went to space. We built cool computer stuff. We built awesome guitars.
Right.
Beginning
60s had a lot of good tech.
Space, beginning of microprocessors.
Yeah.
Advancements in science.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was just the whole decade of just like broadening our minds and our perspective. It's crazy.
I think that was one of the biggest parts for me at the 60s, the idea of the war was going on at that time. And people were filling out their draft cards, putting flowers on it. This is what my uncle did. He got a draft card. He put flowers on it, sent it back into the government. Yeah. There was a whole group of people that were just not going to have this war. And up until that point, there was no real choice. You complied or you weren't American.
Right.
So they split a fraction. And,
I was surprised.
A lot of them are forgiven.
John Kerry, Democratic senator.
Yeah.
Right.
I think he was in some of the services, or one of the services, and was I think he was a Purple Heart winner.
Yeah.
When that whole anti-war movement came around, he spearheaded that.
Yeah.
Did not know that until recently.
Okay.
There's video of Purple Heart winners throwing their Purple Hearts at the White House.
Yeah.
I found that. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I found that when I've talked to people that have seen combat, who've seen war firsthand, a lot of them do not want more war.
Right.
They've seen it firsthand.
Right.
Like, it's all cool to root for that shit from your couch, but
and it's one thing to make a decision from your office when you've never been through it, and you have no idea that you can think the weight of the consequence that you're about to make, but until you've experienced it yourself,
I can only imagine.
So it was just interesting to see, because he was young back then, and he's still in government now, and it was just really interesting to see. He was one of the guys that was there. They threw their Medal of Honor, I don't know, Purple Hearts or Medal of Honors or whatever the medals were. It was like a huge protest, and that's what really kind of started the movement of, we can disagree with the war, and that's when we started. 60s also saw us separate the government from the military in the sense, right? Because it was anti-war protest and they were beating up these vets coming home. And whether or not you agreed with the war or not, these are our people. These are our boys, men and boys that are going over there to serve our country, and they come back and they get pissed on and they get shit on and they get spit on and all this. And so that was kind of the 60s after the 60s, we kind of realized that whether or not we agree with why they're over there, we still need to support our troops, because we still, even Democrats and Republicans alike, still know that we have to have a military. We have to protect ourselves. And how do you encourage people to volunteer for the military when, if they go to war because the government tells them to, and they come home and then, fucking homeless or something, or like they're not taken care of, or
I think
like
there's like a line there. There's supporting the troops and the people that went to war for whatever reason. Representing it. Like, there's a level of treating them well.
They had the
then on the
more
other
balls
side
than I
of that
did.
is like, what are they fighting for? Like, there's a difference between like protesting government policy. Let's not get involved with this war, but people get sent to war that are on from our country. When they come back, maybe you don't agree with why they went to war, but they did step up for you and to some extent. Maybe not primarily, but it just depends on the individual.
Right. Now my history could be off, because I think the Vietnam War ended
the point of getting at with that.
In the 70s or something like that. So this is
probably
after the 60s, but we were still dealing with the Vietnam War in the 60s.
Yeah, it was all going on then.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned too, like making those decisions from your office, or things like that. Wasn't it? I believe it was Fahrenheit 9/11. Michael Moore, where he goes like to like the congressional building with the list of like all of the, like U.S. Congress people whose like family and children were supposed to be drafted. And they got out of it because of who their parent or their family member was in Congress. And
so to date this podcast, Kissinger just recently passed. He was Secretary of State during the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
and he could probably be considered a war criminal based on his decisions and stuff that he made.
Yeah,
indiscriminate bombing. The decision to go into Cambodia during Vietnam was his fault, and he's got a lot of blood on his hands because of the policies that he implemented, and then he just recently passed. And what's crazy is he was it Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State for multiple presidents, and not just Republicans but also Democrats as well. He was Secretary of Defense, or I forget exactly what his mission was for Clinton, Bush, Nixon. He just goes way back, So Kissinger's like a notorious. You talk to like our parents, and some of the flower children and stuff from that time. Yeah, oh, dude.
Well, I mean, it gets
Spiro Agnew and Kissinger are fucking like enemy number one.
Well, I mean, it's tough when you start digging into some of these lines. Like, take the space program that we all just talked about being so proud of. Like, we went to the moon. That's fantastic. But who brought us there?
Yeah,
Von Braun brought us there.
Yeah, right.
And where did we get Von Braun from?
Yeah,
he was a defector. He was a Nazi scientist.
Yeah.
We brought a bunch of people over.
Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, exactly. So you got Operation Paperclip.
Werner
von Braun.
Werner von Braun. So Von Braun, genius, but it's like, sometimes the cost of this stuff it's interesting to look at where it comes from.
Right.
There's a comedian from like back around like I think like around the 70s. His name was Thomas Lear. Played the piano, and he was like classically trained on the piano. Plays a lot of older musical pieces, but he was a comedian, and he would like parody these and like put his own lyrics to them, and it was all very comical. It's probably pretty dated now, looking back, but he had a song about Werner von Braun.
Oh, did he?
and if you know your history, it's actually pretty amusing, like looking back. And the last line of the song, which still makes me laugh, is it's I know English and German, and I'm learning Chinese, says Werner von Braun. So
Well, guys, I think on that note, we're going to wrap it up for season 2. This season has just been, I don't know, kind of the antithesis of like growing, because this season started out with just kind of the 3 of us. Bring Nate on.
Yeah.
It wasn't soon after we brought Nate on. Now we're getting into video.
Right.
And so season 3 coming out early 2024 is just going to be off the chain.
Yeah,
in a way, this is fitting because this is kind of like our 1960s era of us growing.
Yeah, it is.
It's the same way we did.
That's a good way of looking at it, because this is like
experimentation, man.
Everything that we've mentioned today. Yeah.
This season and then this episode and the last season before, are just growing and advancing with the technology and just going from there. So we're really excited to bring to get back to you guys in early 2024. We've got some huge plans. We're gonna I'm gonna get the studio going. Maybe a website.
We got
maybe
big things coming.
Big things coming down the pipe. So
hey, we appreciate everyone listening to this early days here. This is great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Yeah.
And we're having a good time here, trying to come up with fun stuff to share with everybody.
Right. And honestly, we obviously wouldn't be
do this,
and we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't enjoy it. So we, I really look forward to the episodes.
Oh yeah.
And
like Nate said, we're coming up with fun ideas that, to talk to people about, and developing the things we're talking about, like a website and things like that, gives us the opportunity to kind of communicate and reach out. We can have things like surveys. What do you guys want to hear?
Yeah.
And moving forward and things like that. So, we'll probably set something up like that soon. I'm sure. Like we'll set up a poll.
We've got a poll on Spotify. So
we do.
So let us know what you think of the episodes on Spotify. Yeah. Positive or negative. Honestly, in my experience as a creator, getting negative feedback is the hardest. Because everyone wants to be nice.
But, usually there's good nuggets in there, though.
Yeah,
I actually appreciate someone lighting me up sometimes, because they took the time out of their day to give me. If you call me an asshole, I can't do much with that, because that's your opinion. Tell me why.
But tell me why. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I don't want to say negative.
I'm inviting the comments here, but that kind of thing, like feedback. We appreciate feedback, especially constructive of some sort. Doesn't have to be positive, but constructive. You're always helping us out, so appreciate that.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for season 2. Yeah. What an amazing journey. We're looking forward to getting back to you guys come early 2024. Yeah. Until then, be sure to like, subscribe, follow. We're going to get some social stuff on the show.
And tell your friends.
Yes.
Spread the word.
Big things coming. I'm being told that we've got some mega stars coming out. Next. I think we got Bruce Willis. He took he's not acting anymore. He's got some kind of mental cognitivity, so we convinced him to come onto the show.
Yeah.
You don't think, Nate? You don't. No.
Nate drew a line today.
I know, he was like, no. So, on that note, we'll end with a laughter, and we'll see you guys next season.
See ya.
Thank you, guys.